Hi everyone, I'm Abigail. This is Evelyn, and welcome to another Two Kids interview. Today we are joined by New York Times bestselling author Pam Muñoz Ryan. Ms. Ryan has
Hi.
written many books, including her middle grade books, Mañanaland, Paint the Wind, Esperanza Rising, Solimar, and the Dreamer, and the Newbery honor book, Echo. She has her next middle grade book coming out on my birthday, May 6th, El
Hey.
Nino. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here. You're reaching me in California in my office. I live in North San Diego County. And so, yeah, I'm really thrilled to be here. And I'm really thrilled to tell you about El Nino. It's coming out on your birthday. Happy birthday.
Coming up 4 days before my birthday.
Oh, wow. You're both in May, right?
Can you tell us how you learn about your characters and find their voice?
Um, well, first of all, I usually begin my books in a scene. And I don't usually have all my characters lined up and assigned when I start a book. I usually start with one character in a scene and I start writing that scene. And the next day, I go back to the beginning and I read what I've written the day before. And then I rewrite what I've written the day before. And then I develop that scene with that character, or maybe another character. And and I just keep going from there. I go write a little more. I go back to the beginning again the following day. And there comes a point where I know there needs to be more interaction or I want to talk about the character's family. And so slowly but surely, the other characters that I need come into play in my mind. And I realize, who I need to create. Um, Sometimes a character doesn't come about until late in the book. In my new book, I had done several drafts of the story. Then I felt like I needed somebody younger in the story to bring kind of a younger perspective, kind of somebody who was brought some lighter energy to the book, and so I created a younger sister. So sometimes I don't always know going in how many characters I'm going to have and who's going to come into play.
When you have a subject that you decide you want to write about, do you ever start writing for one age group and then realize it might actually work better for a different age group?
Hmm. I don't know that that's ever really happened to me yet. Um, I on my novels, I tend to write for the fifth through about ninth or tenth grade level. And I find it really interesting that that was the age I was when books had the biggest and most profound effect on me from about fifth grade through about ninth grade. So I find it interesting that I now write primarily for the age I was when books made the biggest difference in my life and became really important to me. I've never really, you know, been in the middle of writing a book and then all of a sudden decided, oh, this is much too old for middle grade. Maybe I better either bring it down or move it to young adult. I've never had that happen quite yet.
Books you've written, which one do you connect with the most?
Well, that's really hard because when I'm in the middle of writing a book, I'm really invested in that particular story. For instance, I'm very connected to Esperanza Rising because it parallels my own grandmother's immigration from Aguascalientes, Mexico, to the segregated farm labor camps in the San Joaquin Valley in 1930. So I have like a very personal and emotional connection to that book. But when I was writing Echo, I was so invested in each of those stories and all the music in the book, and I was very sentimental about the book when I was writing it, and especially as I came to a close and was finishing it. I remembered that when I finished writing Becoming Naomi Leon, that I really missed the characters. I've never quite had that experience before, but for that particular book, I just became so attached to my own characters in my mind that it was sort of an effort to leave them with the book, that type of thing. So I guess I've had a connection to so many of my books in very different ways, and also different books. I've brought my personal memories to many of my books. For instance, in Solimar, I grew up traveling to an overwintering site almost every year and to see the monarch butterflies. So, when I think about that book, I think about something that was a personal memory. So for each of my books, I have a different sort of emotional response.
Can you tell us the most fun research you did for one of your books?
Oh, wow. Well, I've had a lot of really great research experiences, even way back as far as writing freedom. I needed to understand how a real stagecoach worked. And somebody told me that at an amusement park here in Southern California at Knott's Berry Farm, they still gave real stagecoach rides. And I contacted them ahead of time. And they were wonderful to me. They had me come to the park and go into the barn and where they still hitched all the horses, of course, and used, stagecoaches, real stagecoaches from the 1800s, and they let me hold six in the hand and they let me actually drive a stagecoach around an arena. So that was fun. When I researched The Dreamer about Pablo Neruda's childhood in Chile, I traveled to Chile. That was really a wonderful experience. But I have to say that probably the most interesting research trip that I've ever had was when I went to Trossingen, Germany, to the Hohner harmonica factory, and got to find out all about the history of the Hohner harmonica, and got to walk through their museum and see all these incredible um, museum piece harmonicas, and harmonicas from the time period that I wrote about in the book. So I think that was probably the most memorable.
I want to drive a stagecoach around an arena.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was really hard though too. It was really hard.
You said books make a big difference in your life when you were our age. Can you tell us how or why they make a difference?
Well, I'll tell you what happened to me. So when I was the summer before fifth grade, my family moved across town, and it was a new neighborhood. I was the new kid on the block. I was going to be the new kid in school with a lot of students who had been together since kindergarten. So that summer, I was feeling very isolated and very alone. I was the oldest in my family and the oldest of all my cousins. So everybody was younger than me, considerably younger than me. So I felt very isolated. I began riding my bike to a little local library, the East Bakersfield Branch Library, filling my bike basket up with books, riding back home, reading all the books. I was sort of coping through books. And then school started, and I had a really hard time fitting in because, like I said, all of these kids had gone to school together since kindergarten, most of them, and I was the new kid in the school and in the grade, and so I didn't really fit in all that well. So I continued I continued sort of escaping into my library books. And every weekend I'd go to the library, check out more books, bring them home, and I was really using them as a way to sort of find my way in the world, so to speak. And so I think that through junior high school as well was not easy for me. So, like I said, from that fifth through about ninth grade, books were really a way for me to escape, but to cope with everything that was going on in my life. And I think that's why they became so important to me.
I actually moved this summer here,
Huh?
but I got lucky and met a few friends like Evelyn at school.
Nice, nice. Yeah. It's always nice to have a friend, right? Yeah.
We know the settings for your books are very important to you. Can you tell us a bit about why it's important and your process for bringing the setting to life for the reader?
Yeah, I feel sometimes that the setting can almost become like a character, and I sort of look at the setting sometimes as one of the characters, that has that because my characters interact so closely and intimately with the settings, and I almost look at the setting in my mind as if it was also a character. Um, so I'm actually really happy to hear that you picked up on that because it's something that the setting is important to me. I like to make the reader feel like they were there, and so when I'm creating that setting, I'm really paying attention uh, to the five senses and the sights and the sounds and the smells and the way things feel, so that the reader feels like they're really immersed in the setting and that they're actually existing within the story. So that's why it's important to me.
What we're learning about in school right now.
Good. Yeah.
There's more representation in books now than ever before. And your books are part of that important trend. Is that something that's important to you?
Well, certainly. I mean, I'm happy that my books reflect part of my heritage. Some of my books reflect it very obviously, like in Esperanza Rising or Becoming Naomi Leon, and some of my books in a far more subtle way. I mean, I don't sit down every time I start out to write a story and say to myself, in this book, I'm going to represent this demographic, or that usually comes about very organically and maybe on a subconscious level, but certainly it's important for me. I mean, I think that, for instance, I get a lot of letters from students and teachers who tell me what my books that have Latino characters have meant to them and how they felt like I was reflecting their story or their family's story or their family's culture. And that's very meaningful. But as meaningful are the letters I get from readers who tell me, wow, I read that book and I didn't know about those people or that time period until you shared it with my eyes, So I, both sides of that are very, very important.
Rejection and failure is part of most authors' stories. Can you tell us about that part of your journey?
Well, I always like to say that all my successes are the very tip of an iceberg, of a very big iceberg below the below the surface. So I mean, starting over is just and rewriting is really just sort of part of what I do, and I accept. I'm very practical about it. I like to say that I'm not really a writer; I'm a rewriter, because nothing for me is ever perfect the first time around or the first 20 times around. So it's certainly as far as an individual manuscript, it's certainly true. I'm the only reason in my mind for those early drafts is that you have something to fix, something to change, something to make better. But all of that work isn't what the actual person or the reader sees. They just see the finished book. If you're talking about career wise, I was like so many in that, I back in the day when I first started submitting manuscripts, I wish I would have saved all my rejection letters. I didn't, so I can't show them to you. But I was rejected, many, many times before I ever got a manuscript accepted. Yeah.
Esperanza Rising has been challenged or banned in places in Texas and Florida. How did that make you feel? And can you give us your thoughts on book bans?
Well, first of all, it makes you, when you've worked so hard on something, or you work and you have a book like Esperanza Rising that's been adopted in most school districts in the United States, it's very disheartening to discover that there are people who are fighting to keep it out of readers' hands. It's an immigration story. In the story that I portrayed, they came to the United States legally, um, and in some places it's been banned only because it's about Mexicans. So it's that part is disheartening too because our entire country is based on one of the common threads for most people in the United States is that we all immigrated from someplace. So yeah, that makes me sad. Um, and book banning, I mean, I'm certainly against it. I just, especially when we're talking about public libraries and high school libraries, um, well, I mean, I'm against it in all aged libraries, but I feel like um, I feel like it's important for readers to be able um, to have agency and choice about what they read.
Do you ever have any story you've wanted to tell for a long time, but you haven't figured out how to do it yet?
Oh, there's lots of those stories. I have a lot of manuscripts on my computer, in a file that there's been many times that I've had what I thought was a great idea for a story, but maybe I got 3 or 4 chapters in and it just really didn't go anywhere, but I just let it rest. Sometimes later on, maybe I'm working on another book and I find a way, an avenue to dovetail those two stories together. So that does occasionally happen, but there are some still that really never fleshed out enough to become a real book. I have some stories that I thought were going to be a novel, but they ended up being a short story, and maybe they ended up in an anthology. So um, certainly, there's a lot of stories where I think they're going to be one thing, and they may not develop, or they may become another thing in the end.
Can you tell us exactly where you were and your reaction when you found out you won the Newbery honor?
Well, that particular year, because they announced it at the American Library Association, back then it was called the Midwinter Conference. So it was in January. But that year, the conference was in Boston, and I live in California. And so I got a phone call. I was in bed, and I got a phone call. I think it was about 3 in the morning. And I looked at my phone, and it said Boston, Massachusetts on it. And so I quickly answered the phone, and it was the committee's announcing that Echo had won a Newbery honor, and everybody was cheering on the line. Um, so I was very, it was almost like a dream because you're getting woken up at such an odd hour, and at that point, I was really, really asleep. But certainly, it was very exciting. And then they tell you can't tell anybody. They said, please don't tell anybody. My editor knew, so I knew I could call my editor, but they said, we won't be making the announcements until 8 o'clock um, Eastern time. So I had 2 more hours and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I just got up and got coffee and sat in front of my computer so I could watch the actual live stream announcements that they made because I was too excited to go back to sleep.
Oh, that sounds so hard not to tell anyone.
I know I couldn't call, I did talk to my editor. I called my editor because they told me your editor already knows. So I knew I could call her. So that was very exciting. But other than that, I couldn't tell anybody.
Like, I feel like for me, like I would have like my message typed out to like like a big group chat of all my closest friends and family. And like I just be like having my thumb like hesitate over the send
The
button until
second.
like the second it comes and the second I can send to people.
The other thing that happened to me is before I won the Newbery Honor, I was fortunate enough to have some of my books win the Pura Belpré Medal and the Schneider Family Award and the trying to think there was one more, and all of those previous awards were they called you on a Sunday. They always called me on a Sunday. So in my mind, I thought, well, if the book had gotten anything, I would hear about it on a Sunday. And so Sunday came and went, and I just ended up going to bed Sunday night thinking, well, you know, the book is still doing well. And, I was kind of rationalizing. And, so I when I went to sleep, when I finally went to sleep, I really went to sleep. So I was really, really surprised because before I'd always received phone calls on a Sunday if I received an ALA award. And yeah, so I was very, very surprised at 3 in the morning.
Are you concerned at all about artificial intelligence and its impact on books and publishing?
Oh, certainly. I think everybody is. I mean, artificial intelligence is, I'm not naive about it. I think it's probably here to stay. And I think there are many practical uses. I think it's a tool, but like many tools that we have, digital tools that we have, there's always going to be abuses. And I think the real issue is like, how do we prevent abuse and plagiarism and all of those issues. So yes, I think anybody who works in the arts is very concerned.
Oh, Nino comes out May 6th, and I have already pre-ordered my copy. Can you
Yay!
tell, can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Well, the book originally, the idea for the book about 15 years ago. Well, first let me tell you, I live near the Pacific Ocean. So I love to be in, on, or near the water. And about 15 years ago, I started, kind of always wanted to write an underwater realm story. And I started a book about two mer people that lived in an underwater world. And the story, just like we were saying before, you say, have I ever started a story and it really never went anywhere? That I started the story, I wrote a few scenes, and I just didn't have a great tie-in. Um, and it kind of floundered a little. I put it on a back burner in my mind. And I started researching Echo and then Mañanaland. And so then when I finally decided to revisit the story, the pandemic hit. And there was just so much sadness around us. And in my mind, these mer people who I called mermalians, who live in the mythology of my book. There's the myth, and then there's the regular story. And so the mermalians who live in the myth were protecting something far more precious than gold. But I could not figure out what that was in my mind. And so that's when I put it on the back burner and I started another project and in another book. And then when I finally came back to revisit this story about this underwater world, I then COVID hit, and there was just so much grief and despair, and people sadness, and people losing family members, and the isolation, and we also lost our communities and our camaraderie with the people that are friends and our professional people that we worked with, and so it was very emotional time, and there was so much loss everywhere, and so I began to wonder, where does all of our sadness go? Is there a safe place to like protect and guard our sadness, even if just for one moment, so that we can like take a breath, come up for air? And so in my mind, I created the Library of Despair and Sorrow. And that's what was the something more precious than gold that my underwater mermalians that in the underwater world that they could protect was the world's sadness. So the Library of Despair and Sorrow is a sanctuary for the world's sadness, and my mermalians in the underwater realm protect the library and protect the world's sadness. So then enter the contemporary story. So that's the mythology in the book, and then enter my protagonist, Kai Sosa, who's a swimmer. It's a swimming story. He swims on an elite team, and he's had a sadness in his family, a tragedy, and the story is about how he copes with it and how he encounters the myth and is so invested in the myth that reality and fantasy collide. And so that gives you an idea of what the story is about. Yeah.
Why is the story called The Boy?
Well, first of all, the story, I've also always been fascinated with the weather effect known as El Nino. So El Nino means it does make a very strong reference to the weather effect that we all know as El Nino, the warm water effect that happens every 5 to 7 years. And El Nino means the boy, and it means my protagonist, the boy. So it has sort of a double meaning. And so there's a lot of information about the weather effect in the story and in the author's note. So yeah, it's a double meaning.
How much mermaid research did you do? And was there anything crazy you learned about mermaids?
Well, I mean, first of all, I did a lot of research on the mythology of mer people, and and then I also did a lot of research on lost worlds and lost kingdoms, because the book is also tied into the mythology of how California got its name. The book begins once there was an island called California, and that's true. At one time in the 1500s, people thought that California was an island. And so the mythology of mermaids is all tied in also to this story about how California got its name in the 1500s. So I did a lot of research about the mythology of mermaids. I think what I found fascinating the most about it is that so many of the stories hark back to Greek mythology and ancient tales from the Far East. And these stories about mer people have been go all the way back before even the written word. And when it was just an oral history. So I find that pretty fascinating. Oh, I should show you the back of the book. So here's the front of the book, and there's the back.
Oh, that's cool. It's a little tail.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sick. What writer has had the most influence on you?
Ray Bradbury. Um, I would say a lot of books that are, classics. I remember reading as a child a lot of short stories by O. Henry and reading you have to remember something. I come from a very small town, and the little branch library that was in my town, I mean, you have to remember their collection was probably very old and not very current. So I read a lot of classic, what you consider classics like Swiss Family Robinson and Anne of Green Gables, and I as a writer, then as I got older and went away to school, I started reading other middle grade books, especially when I was studying to be a teacher, like Sarah Plain and Tall. I love Sarah McLaughlin's books, and I love her writing. So I mean, so many of my earliest influences were based on what was available at this really small, tiny branch library. Um, yeah.
What are you writing right now?
I'm slowly working on a new novel. It's just at such preliminary stages that I'm not really sure quite where it's going yet. But next year, I did write the script for the graphic novel of Esperanza Rising, and that's being illustrated right now. So that's coming out next fall. Yeah.
Okay, I will be getting that.
Yeah. It was a really different, they asked me, would you to do this? And I said, yeah, I'm willing to give it a try. And it was very different format, but of course I already had the book, and they wanted the graphic novel to be very close to the book. So I wrote the script, and then that was turned over to the illustrator.
If you have another book, like one of your books that you would turn into a graphic novel, which one do you think it would be?
Oh, I don't know. I'll tell you one issue that I discovered that's really um, interesting is, so say your book is like this size, right? So in a graphic novel, like
It's even
Esperanza
bigger.
Rising is about this, like it's going to be thicker. So Esperanza Rising is now more pages than the original book because of the graphics
Because
in the
it's like
book.
pictures.
Yeah, so like
And
I think about Echo, that's almost 600 pages. I don't know, that doesn't lend itself so much, right? So I don't know. I think Writing Freedom would be really fun to have as a graphic novel.
now it's time for our Turbo 10. 10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Number one, what is your favorite phrase to use?
My favorite phrase to use, um, I would say, leap and the net will appear.
Number two, what is one subject you'd love to learn about more about?
Oh, that I'd love to learn more about. I think I'd have to say playing the cello.
Number three, what is your go-to snack food?
Popcorn,
Number
definitely.
four, what was your favorite book growing up?
My favorite book growing up would have been Anne of Green Gables.
Number five, if you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
Ooh, I think I would go to Hawaii.
Number six, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Visibility.
Number seven, what was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Oh, wow. The Jetsons.
Number eight, what is your favorite rainy day activity?
Oh, baking, cooking.
Number nine, if you could have any three dinner guests, who would they be? No
Oh, okay.
rules.
No rules. Okay. Three dinner guests. Well, I think I would like to have, I would like to have the poet Pablo Neruda. I would like to have Amelia Earhart, and I would like to have Eleanor Roosevelt.
Number 10, what is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Ooh, I would say the best piece of advice I was ever given was to not be afraid to start over.
You were awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Welcome.
And
Yeah,
thank you
that
so
was
much
fun.
for spending this time with us. And we can't wait to read your future books.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really fun being here.